For the last month, we've begun the work of looking at all the rookies coming into the NFL in 2024 and trying to figure out position by position which guys are going to be the ones that matter the most as we head into best ball for 2024, fantasy football for 2024, all the formats where we need to know who's good and who's not. Today, though, we are on to the tight ends, and in particular, there's one tight end that we have to learn about. Brock Bowers, a guy who's been a high pedigree tight end coming in the last few years in college football, has lived up to the hype. We'll look at the advanced analytics today and try to figure it out. And of course, that is going to be the process here. It is a deep data dive that I do for myself, for my personal prep, that we bring in here on stream again this year. What we're going to do is look at the advanced analytics from Sports Info Solutions to try to find out who are the best tight ends to target in fantasy football in 2024 amongst the rookies. Let's get going here. Shout out to all you guys that are watching either live or after the fact. I appreciate you coming on here because, of course, I understand this is just the prep work part. This is the part that people don't find the most fun. This is the fun part for me as well, that it's hard to make fun. I always like to try to have silly banter, silly things going on here. So we end up looking up shirtless players and such on here because that's fun, right? That's heterosexual, normal football fan fun. But it is definitely more of a process here, though, where we do talk about this is the work that you need to do to be ready to go when the big board hits on Underdog in about 2 weeks, when you are drafting teams in March and April and May and June and July, and people don't know who these guys are. That's why we do this now. So let's get into it. And of course, let's start off as we had the last few videos. We're just reviewing what we did in 2023, what we got right, what we got wrong about the rookie tight ends, what we can learn from as part of that process. We got Michael Mayer, and Michael Mayer is the one that I really think, in terms of the results that we got last year, Michael Mayer, one of my favorite rookie tight ends to draft. Luke Musgrave, Dalton Cade a little bit less so because his ADP got a little bit too frothy. That was very all over Dalton Cade in the big board, the early parts of best ball draft season. Those three guys definitely stood a very good tier above, along with Sam Laporta as well as number 4 in that group. And Laporta was the cheapest one. Laporta in the big board last year was basically getting undrafted. Kincaid pretty close to getting undrafted. Michael Mayer was the one, though, last year where everybody had all the hope for him. He had the baby Gronk nickname comparisons. He had the 36% target per out run rate, as you can see here on the screen. But Michael Mayer just did not live up to the hype. And I think what we could look at here, maybe why he didn't live up to that hype quite as much compared to guys like Musgrave, I guess like Laporta, though Laporta has the same issue. Michael Mayer, so a very high target per out run rate at 36%, only a 0.14 EPA per target. So that is one thing here where I always swear by the altar of the EPA metrics and try to still be balanced about it, where if you have a positive EPA, that's usually enough for me to go, all right, this guy's at least got that going. He's not taking value away every time he's touching the ball. For Michael Mayer, though, he was not as good as the peers around him. Wasn't even as good as Darnell Washington, who had a 0.4 EPA per target last year, though Darnell, low route amount, low volume of targets as well. It's sort of a guy that you couldn't really peg because he's just too big to play football, which I think we kind of found this year. We ended up being basically an offensive lineman when he was out there for the Steelers. For Michael Mayer, though, I think this is the one thing you can point to is that he was a negative EPA receiver under 10 air yards. He was a negative EPA receiver. Actually, that's not correct. Hold on. I got to freeze this top row here so I could see everything accordingly. Freeze top row. Okay. So Michael Mayer, not good out wide last year was one issue with him. He was also not great in the slot, but was still a positive EPA player there. Not good under 10 air yards, a negative EPA there. Not great downfield. I don't think Michael Mayer is donezo, to be clear. That's the one thing I do have to say for him. But I would say for Mayer, he really seemed like a guy that would be a priority, something that you should be going out of your way to get based off that pedigree, based off the fact that he'd been commanding a lot of targets at Notre Dame. And he really didn't live up to that hype. So I think that's where, for Mayer, I'm a little bit gun shy about tight ends in general because the only thing you could really point to is that the EPA numbers aren't that great, but he still looks good across everything else. And I think for tight ends, that is something that defined my year last year. There was a lot of Mayer, and he had maybe 1-2 usable good games. Definitely nowhere near a Sam Laporta. Check the chat real fast because I did not look at that up top. We got Tyler here. Can't watch live. Shouts to Tyler. Shouts to all you guys who do come by. Appreciate you whether you're watching live or after the fact, of course. Again, these videos, I don't expect to be views killers here. It's more about my process more than anything, but you're seeing it here live. And of course, fortunately, seeing me lick the wounds of last year. What else did we get right last year? So Kincaid was the guy I liked the most last year. In terms of just the overall EPA metrics looking good, the ability for him to play out the slot, thought that was a very Travis Kelce-esque ability for him with a 0.65 EPA there, 4.5 slot targets per game. Also good under 10 air yards, not good 10 to 20 air yards, which I do remember confounding me last year. That ended up really mattering in the pros. I think it ended up being kind of an outlier in terms of just not getting enough targets there. And as a result, not having the opportunity to create big value with what Dalton Kincaid does. But Kincaid, though, I think the main thing that we saw with him is that his production on the field led to him earning the draft capital. It led to him earning the role over the course of a year. He still had to swim upstream a little bit with Dawson Knox when Dawson Knox is healthy out there, including, this past weekend, these past few weeks of Dawson Knox being back in. Dallin Cade just can't get the full amount of run. But that said, he earned the trust pretty early because he was a good enough player to get on the field and show that in practice. And I think that's where Kincaid, where you see the pretty good target per route run rate. Again, not as good as Mayer, but still good. You see the high EPA. You see him adding a positive EPA basically everywhere you're putting him on the field besides that 10 to 20 air yards range. So for Kincaid, I think that's why he worked out, was that he was a good enough player. He performed well enough. He was able to then get on the field and force their way there. And then you combine it with the draft capital as well. That's why Kincaid worked out. Mayer's draft capital being a little bit lower, maybe that made it easier to keep him off the field. But I think Mayer's biggest issue is that he was hurt in training camp. He was also hurt through portions of the year. And obviously, he ended up being hurt down the home stretch, the time of year we'd expect to make the biggest leap. And you also have an alpha target earner going there as well, where Michael Mayer, the best possible scenario for him with Devontae Adams out there, with Jacoby Myers as a free agent signing, it seems like the best possible scenario for him, if he had crushed and was full health, was maybe a 20 to 25% target share, and that might be a little aggressive. So I think that's where Michael Mayer failed, where Dallin Kincaid did not, was Kincaid didn't have as high of a target share, but he was able to find a way to get in the field, and Mayer could not get on the field and also then could not earn the targets as well. So I think even if he got on the field, so I think that's where maybe there's something we can learn from that, a little bit hard to unpack against tight ends because of the way that it's such a situational dependent thing, where I think if you would put Kincaid on the Lions, I think Kincaid would have been basically Sam Laporta. I think if you put Musgrave on the Lions, I think he would have been a similarly explosive version of Sam Laporta, maybe more of a downfield target, which we did see Laporta have some success with, but not get the reliable downfield usage. For Musgrave, he only played 2 games last year, I believe, for Oregon State. Still basically was being targeted downfield exclusively in terms of how he was in that offense. So I would say for Musgrave, I think that he, Kincaid, and I think Mayer too, honestly. I think all of these guys would have been Laporta in Detroit. So the situation is a key part here, being part of an ascendant offense. Also a thing too, where there was no real blocked pathway for Laporta to get on the field. He had to beat out Brock Wright. He had to beat out James Mitchell, who was a younger pick, but still these guys are not high pedigree guys, not guys like Laporta coming out of Iowa, who had that sort of a, that tight end school pedigree that does come from basically every Iowa tight end. So I think Laporta, that's the main things that we could say with him, is that he had the high target per route run rate, negative EPA per target, didn't matter quite as much, but the high avoided tackle rate as well, which is going to be a trade again we see for another Iowa tight end based on the numbers I looked at. I think it's really the combination of he's good enough here. He's not an albatross at a position, still a big-bodied guy. Again, the mobility here of having a 33% avoided tackle rate. That's what I think we're looking for, is who's a guy that's got sort of enough of an ability and then is going to land in the right spot to really have the upside. And I think that's where we're looking for this year's Laporta. As much as we are looking for this year's Kincaid, as much as we're looking for this year's Musgrave, all of those guys, I think we're going to see similar archetypes, but we want a guy like a Laporta who's going to be good enough and land in the ideal spot, I think is what I've learned. Wonder if Mayer was also held back with McDaniel and the Patriots' way of bringing on rookies slowly. Possible. I mean, I think it was really him being hurt. He was hurt throughout all of training camp for the most part. And that's the biggest thing that I think we can't control as best ball drafters. But being hurt in training camp and then being, out for the early parts of the year, you could get back in there. But I think we saw that with enough guys where Mayer, Kendre Miller, these guys that just kind of got the slow start. Whereas like a Puka Nacua, who was healthy and out there and was working in them with the breakfast bunch of Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford for the Rams. That's part of why I got there, was I think he was a plus EPA guy who then landed in a situation where he was healthy and then was in there and was, obviously able to show his ability and his, off the field ability too, to kind of add value and work himself into the roster. So I think we're kind of looking for rookies, a little bit of a combo of all the above, if you really want to target guys aggressively. For the big board, though, we're not going to know that half. So I think you are just trying to target talent and try to target guys that if they land in that right spot, they can be good. And I think that's the hope. But loving the early look at college prospects. I appreciate that. Look, I think this is one of the videos where I hate doing videos where not a lot of people watch. But this, frankly, is a really important part of things for me. So I hope it is for you guys as well. That's 2023. Let's go into 2024. And let's start off with Brock Bowers and his numbers. And Brock Bowers, for what it's worth, last year, I did put his numbers in with a lot of the other guys. He is really the only guy based off the 2023 numbers for this incoming rookie class of 2024. Brock Bowers has green numbers here. So even relative to these guys who did get drafted last year, who did play well, who did have high draft capital that went their way, Brock Bowers held his own against these guys. He had 4.2 catches per game, so a little bit less than Mayer at 5.6, less than Kincaid at 5.8, less than Musgrave at 5.5. Bowers also, again, 27% target per out run rate, less than Michael Mayer at 36, less than Kincaid at 29, less than 31% for Musgrave, though Musgrave, again, a 2-game sample size, less than Schoonmaker, less than Laporta. But Bowers, though, still a very positive EPA, a 0.562 EPA. So he would be, based off last year's class, the third most efficient tight end behind Luke Musgrave and Brenton Strange, two guys who did not get a lot of work. Again, Musgrave only played 2 games, Brenton Strange only playing 15 routes per game. So I would say that for Brock Bowers, that's where the value is, along with the fact that he added value last year, every level of the field. And again, he was young, like for a tight end. Brock Bowers, let's see, what's his age right now? But this is last year's numbers, and he was doing about as well as all the guys who got drafted last year. And he's 21 right now, doesn't turn 22 until December. So for Brock Bowers, this was basically him at 20 years old, and he was right there with these guys last year. So I think for Brock Bowers, that's the main thing that jumped out looking at his numbers last year, is that he held his own, where a lot of these other guys that are going to be drafted tight ends this year did not hold their own in terms of what they did last year. So Bowers, let's go to his numbers for this year. Even better for the most part, at least relative to the competition around him. 0.52 EPA, 5.6 catches per game. So he's basically right where all these other tight ends last year were, is Brock Bowers. 7.2 targets per game, a 32% target per out run. Everything going up for him for the most part. Out wide, not very good. Only 1 target out wide, though, so a little bit of a small sample size thing per game. But a negative 0.27 EPA is not what you want to see. At the slot, though, he would be a better slot receiver, I believe, than all the guys from last year. Yeah, better out of the slot than everybody besides Brenton Strange. And Brenton Strange, again, did not get much work. So I think for Brock Bowers, the main thing that jumps out is that he is likely safe to be better than all the rookie tight ends last year. So we still need him to land in a good spot. And I do think the ADPs are going to be very high for Brock Bowers because he's a name that people have known, because he's been playing like full time since he was a freshman, basically. I think that's where Brock Bowers comes to a little bit of a risk point. But I would say for Brock Bowers, like, I think in the situation that he's a better player where you want a tight end to be a good player. He's better out of the slot. He's getting similar target per out run rate. The EPA numbers are looking better. He's a positive EPA player at every level of the field. Under 10 air yards, a 0.48 EPA. Under 10 to 20 air yards, Brock Bowers is at a 0.56 EPA. Over 20 air yards, a 0.59 EPA. So not as good as last year. He was a 1 flat, but still he's adding value at every level. The red zone, not great, but still getting 1.6 red zone targets per game. So he was commanding that opportunity, if not getting the results with it. So Brock Bowers, to me, the main thing that I would say is that he needs to land somewhere good, but he's better than Kincaid. He is better than Mayer. He is better than Laporta. He is better than Musgrave. Like, he's better than all these guys. He just has to land on a Chargers, on a, what else would be a good one? Replacing the Brevin Jordan / Dalton Schultz spot on Houston would be another great one. Something like that. Miami, where like they had fucking Durham Smythe out there doing nothing. Of course, we wanted the rookies to go to Miami last year, but if Brock Bowers goes to Miami, that is a completely different offense. That it certainly would hurt Tyreek a little bit, would certainly hurt Jalen Waddle a little bit, would also hurt Brock Bowers' ceiling, kind of the same way that Kincaid's ceiling gets hurt. But I think Brock Bowers right away would be a guy giving you 10 points a game with the potential to put up 20, maybe 30 if he's really hitting the ground running from day one. So for Brock Bowers, I think that there's a lot of spots that he can go to, a lot of guys as well that did not get the star rookie last year at tight end, that they could be willing to go there a little bit higher this year with draft capital. But Bowers is going to have draft capital. He's likely to find a good spot, we would hope. So I think for Bowers, a lot of ways that he could win here. And the hope would be that he lands on an exciting team. Like the Chargers would be fun here. Historical Anomalies is saying, I would agree that, obviously I said it, so I would agree with that. But point being, I think for Brock Bowers, like I think there's a lot of ways for him to win out and be useful. So that's one that I would say, like, peg him in. Don't even worry about him. Brock Bowers is a guy that he's going to be probably ADP'd appropriately, but honestly, wherever his ADP is when the big board first launches, when these tournaments first launch, I would still come over the top and try to grab Brock Bowers because he's the rookie tight end that is in a class of his own. Notable missing players: Jatavian Sanders from Texas should be second or third tight in the draft. So I don't know why that's not on CBS's list, but I will see. Let me make sure I have his name right. Nice, misspelled Sanders. All right, so let's get his name the way that it is in the database here. Let's plug him in over here. Paste values only. All right. Come on, Jatavian. What? Oh, shit. All right, there we go. Why is it? Okay, there. It's coming in and out. We got Jatavian on here now. We'll get to him at the end here. Going to go with the order of the CBS prospects. So yeah, Brock Bowers, like it's as simple as this. Like Brock Bowers is the guy you want a tight end. That's it. As we talked about so far, I guess I'll make an official flag plant of these guys soon, but a QB for me, the guy that I want is Jayden Daniels. A running back, the guy that I want is Audric Estime. At wide receiver, I guess a few guys that I want, but it's Marvin Harrison really, and then Malik Neighbors would be number 2. And then Romo Dunze, we'll see what he does at the combine stuff. Those are the guys I want at wide receiver. At tight end, it's Brock Bowers. And to me, if you left every big board draft with those guys, especially if they're going cheap in the beginning, I think you'll put yourself in a very good position to have that. Still need to stack up, still need to get some stuff right, have some good guesswork as well for our free agency and also the trades and all that stuff is going to happen in the offseason. But for the big board, I think that having the star players and knowing who the star players are at each position is a big advantage, because the ADP values you get, you're just not going to find any other format where you do have last year, like Anthony Richardson was going undrafted at the beginning of the big board. Kincaid was going pretty close to undrafted. I think he was mostly, he might have actually been going fully undrafted. Musgrave, Laporta, undrafted guys in the big board last year. So I think that's the main thing I would push for you guys here is like the ones that are really standing out to me. I think you could take in pretty much every big board draft and feel okay about it, obviously relative to ADPs, but I would imagine a lot of these guys, the ADPs will not be correct and not be efficient. Malachi Corley at wide receiver. We looked at him last week and was not impressed. The small guy playing at Western Kentucky did not do a lot for me. Number 2 tight end according to CBS. And again, this is ranked according to them. You can see CBS's prospect list here where it does think Brock Bowers is a top 5 prospect overall. So the expectation by CBS would be that he could be a top 5 draft pick. I think more likely Brock Bowers is a top 10 to top 15 guy because tight end draft capital can be a little bit elusive these days. Definitely first round is the safe spot, but Bowers to me should go higher than where Kincaid and those guys did. They went in the 20s last year. So I think Bowers, worst case scenario, is top 15. Cade Stover, though, is the only other top 100 prospect in this class coming off of Ohio State. Not a high target per out run rate guy, just 23%. High EPA guy, though, very efficient at a 0.43 EPA at Ohio State. As we talked about, Marvin Harrison was less efficient this year, even though he was still very good, obviously. He was less efficient this year with the downgraded QB compared to CJ Stroud last year. For Cade Stover, same thing here. He's got a positive EPA, a really positive EPA, in fact, but he's doing it with a lesser QB. So I would say for Cade Stover, that is a good sign, along with the fact that all these tight ends, once again, just gigantic dudes, 6'4", 240 for Bowers, 6'4", 250 for Stover, 6'4", 245 for Sinnott. Like all these guys are basically 6'3", 6'4", 250-ish. So I think for all the tight ends, like size, not a concern for them. And for the most part, they should be safe to get on the field there. Or the hope would be they'd be safe to get on the field in year 1. Out wide, Cade Stover was really good, but barely got any volume. Only 0.2 targets out wide per game, so really you can kind of throw this number out, but still a positive number. We want to see positive numbers everywhere if we can. 0.92 EPA is a good thing. 0.55 EPA out of the slot, getting less slot targets than Brock Bowers does, but doing comparably well with them, so I think that's a positive sign for a guy like Cade Stover. Under 10 air yards, 0.12 EPA, that's fine. 10 to 20 air yards, 1 EPA is actually very impressive. The overall volume of targets is tough, though. Only 4.3 targets per game. So you're seeing only 3.1 under 10 air yards, 1.2, 10 to 20, 0.5 over 20 air yards. But he's great when he got him. So for Cade Stover, that is the main thing here. The tough part for a guy like Cade Stover is whenever I see these guys and they're not getting the full complement of routes, I worry that there is a reason that they didn't get that full complement of routes and that maybe they're not going to get them in the pros either. But I think for Stover, he is a pretty clear number 2. The one flaw in his game, really bad in the red zone, negative 0.02 EPA per red zone target, negative 0.6 EPA per inside the 10-yard line target. So basically a point and a half, or I guess actually, no, almost 2 points less in terms of EPA added when Cade Stover was targeted compared to a Brock Bowers. So like that's a pretty big deficiency that he's bad in the red zone. Obviously, you want your tight ends, like we've seen the rise of the basketball player tight ends, because they're so great in the red zone. That's where they add a lot of value to both fantasy and to teams' perception of these players. So if Cade Stover can't be good in the red zone, that's a fairly big ding. But besides that, though, the numbers look pretty good. I do think Cade Stover, to me, I get why he'd be at number 2. I'm not locking him in by any stretch. And again, I have to say right away, like Brock Bowers, really good. I don't think these other guys are Musgrave, Laporta, like Michael Mayer. I don't think they're these tier of guys. So I think that's the one thing that jumped out to me from doing my preliminary research here, was that like these guys, if they land in a good situation, can be fine. But I think that in general, for some of these guys here, like you can't have the same level of confidence we had last year, where I remember pushing back on our guy, John Daigle, who's like, no rookie tight ends ever done blah, blah, blah. And that was a common take that people had in like July and August. So it wasn't just a Daigle thing, but I was like, hey man, like these guys are different. Like these guys were all built to be like day one kind of guys. I don't think that's the case for this class, where the targets per route run are lower, the EPAs are a little bit lower, the routes run per game are a little bit lower for a lot of these guys. So I think that's where, we kind of have to draw that line of delineation, where Brock Bowers is better than everybody last year. The rest of the tight ends, though, I think are definitely worse than at least the top guys last year. Stover held back a little by having so many good wide receivers at Ohio State. That's true, but he's also held back by just not running routes and being kind of kept in the block. It's only 3.2 less routes per game than Brock Bowers, but you do want to see, you want the sample size to be as big as possible to have that full confidence in him. So we don't see a ton of targets, we don't see a high target per route run rate, and we also see a guy who's being used as a blocker a lot. I think that's something where I worry a little bit about Cade, but the size is there. The positive EPA metrics are there. So it all comes down to where you get drafted. If you get drafted like Cameron Latu and is behind like a Kittle, like Latu is in San Francisco, or I guess was. I don't think Latu's been active at any point recently. It's hard for that guy to get forward. So I think that's where Cade is, where he's still going to look okay. But if he lands behind, I don't know, Hunter Henry, it's like you can't expect him to pass Hunter Henry. It's kind of how I feel about Cade Stover. Ben Sinnott, I think, a little bit more intriguing to me. 24 routes per game, 6.3 targets, got 4 catches on those. 31% avoided tackle rates, a little bit of Laporta level juice in his game. Though weirdly, Erick All is the Iowa tight end for this year, and he also has a high avoided tackle rate. So I kind of wonder if there's something about Iowa where we've seen this be the case for guys like Kittle, Noah Fant to a lesser extent. Who's the other Iowa tight ends that are out there? I'm sure there's a few more that I'm forgetting of note. A lot of these Iowa tight ends can be ones that like break tackles, break the long plays, and Kittle would obviously be the most famous example, but Noah Fant too, for the amount of volume he gets, has been a fairly elusive player who some people think is going to have like that second contract breakout based on some of his numbers. So I think for Iowa tight ends, it's interesting to see that, like, once again, another guy here targeted at a high level and also was kind of shifty despite being 6'5" and 250. So Erick All is going to be the Laporta of this year, even though a little bit less good than Laporta, a little bit less used than Laporta was last year in terms of being a vessel for that offense. Ben Sinnott over here, 26% target route run rate. I think Sinnott looks okay. I think we're seeing a little bit of Michael Mayer with him, though, where he was not the most efficient. A 0.26 EPA relative to this class is not very good. And tight end EPAs tend to be a little bit higher than wide receiver ones in general because tight ends get more efficient routes, more efficient targets overall. But for Sinnott, though, I think I see no real flaws here. High avoided tackle rate means we do have an athlete. 0.82 EPA out wide, only 0.4 targets per game out wide, but still did pretty well with them. At the slot, not as good as other guys. That's something where maybe you do want to see him more in line as a tight end, which limits some of the upside a little bit. Obviously, our guys that can play in the slot more are going to have more theoretical upside, can also earn more routes, like a Cade did, where you're being used as that sort of wide receiver 3 in portions of the year. So that's a little bit of a risk point for Sinnott that he was not used that way. And when he was used that way, he wasn't very good with it. Under 10 air yards, though, 3.6 targets per game, good for a 0.03 EPA, which is not great, but is still positive. 2 targets between 10 to 20 air yards per game and had a 1 EPA flat there. So he was really good feasting beyond the sticks. 20 air yards downfield was not that great, a negative 0.4 EPA, so not a downfield guy. Again, Sinnott kind of looks like a blocker guy, a guy who, he's shifty, so he should be better downfield, I would think. But that is not an impressive number to see downfield and would worry me a little bit about his ability to get there. That said, it comes down to the will of the team using him. Like Luke Musgrave was a great downfield receiver in college last year, but he wasn't really used that way for Green Bay. Could be the issues with him not getting there all the way. It could be Jordan Love as well, who did not really grow into the Jordan Love that we saw in the back half of the year until Musgrave was already hurt and had that lacerated kidney. So for Musgrave, I think that he was a guy that I really loved the downfield stuff, so I don't want to obsess about downfield stuff because clearly that did not go 1-to-1 last year. But I do think being bad downfield is not a great thing for Sinnott here in his spot. Great in the red zone, though. 0.99 EPA per target, so we could say a 1 flat EPA per target in the red zone, a 0.9 EPA inside the 10-yard line. I think Sinnott's got some merits. I just wish he were better downfield. If he were better downfield, and frankly, if his EPA overall were a little bit better, but if his EPA were better downfield, his EPA would be better overall. If he had that going in his game, he would look like a very complete tight end who I think has the ability. So I don't want to fully write off Sinnott. I think I'm seeing some issues in like his ability to move around here. Again, not being good in the slot is the thing that I think is a real flaw for a modern tight end. But it's possible that we could blame his QB in Kansas State. It's possible that that's where he just couldn't get the value downfield because it wasn't on him. So for Sinnott, I'd say let's plant a minor flag for him. But I think he's still like, I have questions. I don't have questions about Brock Bowers. I have questions about Stover. I have questions about Sinnott. Jaheim Bell, as part of this Florida State team, of course, that had a good run this year. Then things kind of fell apart down the home stretch when motivation waned. Of course, they did make the playoff. 26% target per out run rate for Jaheim Bell. 3 catches per game, not that great on 4 targets. So we are not seeing a big target earner, but he was only running 16 routes per game. The fact he's only running 16 routes per game, again, could be an issue, like we talked about with Darnell Washington. Would like to see that be higher, but a 0.4 EPA per target is still pretty good. So I think for Florida State, I like this spot for the theoretical upside, but in terms of what he did, it's hard to really judge a guy who ran only 16 routes per game and didn't get tremendous results everywhere with it. Let's see. Bell is interesting, kind of an H-back, has played running back, fullback, but his body and moves like a wide receiver, so could be a slot tight end. Could be a slot. I mean, he was really effective in the slot last year. Just the lack of target earning, I think, would make him not a slot. Because, like, if you're going to play along with actual receivers, you need to be earning targets like a receiver everywhere you're going. And the fact he's only getting a 26% target per out run rate, which, like tight end target per out run rates tend to be a little bit inflated inherently because they're not running as many routes. When they are running a route, they're likely to be involved more. And they also are obviously the safety blankies for QBs. So they get targeted a little bit more there. So for Bell, the fact that he didn't earn big targets is a little bit of a concern, but decent avoided tackle rate, 0.4 EPA per target, 1 target out wide per game, which he was okay with. Definitely better in the slot with his 1 target per game, 0.7 EPA there. Good at every level. Under 10 air yards, a 0.28 EPA. 10 to 20 air yards, a 0.7 EPA. 20 plus air yards, a 0.9 EPA. And then the red zone was okay, but not great, was Bell. Yeah, I don't know. For Bell, I think the sample size thing is a question. The size a little bit smaller than some of the other guys as well, but that could make him, like a historical anomaly saying, could make him more of an H-back guy. But that also is maybe not a great thing if you're a little bit smaller and they can move you in the backfield. That's something where you end up kind of in a no man's land of getting targets. So I think for Bell, I would say that could be a positive, could also be a negative. For Bell, though, I think he looks okay as well, but nothing here looks exemplary. It's really just Brock Bowers looks exemplary, and these other guys I think just look like dudes. Let's see. Dallin Holker. CSU looks like a beast. All right, let's look at Dallin. We'll add Dallin in here. And sometimes these guys do end up being important to note. Sometimes these guys end up being gems, and sometimes they end up just being a negative 0.05 EPA guy. But that's why, the eye test I think is important. But I do like the eye test combined with the EPA metrics where, like Sam Laporta being negative last year, you watch some of the game film from him, whether it be just the highlights or full games of him. It's like, oh, Laporte is out there. He's earning targets. When he gets a target, he does something with it. But, the EPA metrics weren't there because Iowa sucked. I think for some of these guys, you give them grace, but like they have to have other things you could point to. And for Holker, we're looking at negative EPAs everywhere, which doesn't fill me with joy. Bryson Nesbit, North Carolina here, benefiting from some of the Drake May effect, perhaps, but still not that great. 22% target per hour run rate is not doing a whole lot for you overall. 0.39 EPA per target is okay. Nesbit, though, I don't know. Downfield target is a good thing. As we talked about, Drake May did force the ball downfield decently well last year. 11 intended air yards per target would be the second highest in the class behind Gavin Bartholomew. So for Nesbit, I guess that's a positive sign. Negative EPA out wide, so it's fine. We don't need our tight ends to go out wide. It would be nice to see a positive there, but not a necessity by any stretch. Pretty good out of the slot. Actually earned the most slot targets per game besides Holker. 4.3 slot targets per game last year. 0.36 EPA per target. Positive EPAs everywhere on the field, but was not great downfield at just the 0.35 EPA. Red zone target, good in the red zone overall, not good inside the 10-yard line. He had a negative 0.42 EPA inside the 10-yard line, but a 0.48 EPA overall in the red zone. So Nesbit, I think, looks okay. I kind of think personally, I don't know, the yak stuff's not great for him. Nesbit and Bell have different strengths, different weaknesses. I'd prefer a guy like Nesbit because I think earning the targets downfield is a positive sign for him. But I think Bell being shiftier, I could see why people would gravitate towards Jaheim Bell a little bit more. These guys, though, are just kind of dudes. Like, I feel like if I were to say right now, and again, this is before all the combine testing, before all that comes up, I would say that all these guys, to me, kind of look like a Schumacher kind of guy last year. And I guess, you could say Cameron Latu, too, where, like, yeah, these guys are, like, okay, but they're not really doing enough here that I could have the confidence to say you should be leaving every draft. Like, that is what I did in the big board last year. Was like, I want to leave every draft with at least a couple of Laporta, of Musgrave, of Mayer, and of Kincaid. And that was my goal in the big board. This year in the big board, I think you want to leave with Brock Bowers, and that's basically it. I think we got a class full of Bretton Stranges, a class full of guys with some Schumacher's. Guys just have some positive metrics, but I think we're going to have a hard time seeing the field because none of them are doing anything outside the box. And I think that's where it's not the most exciting class to see so far. Theo Johnson, we want to. God, you guys are just coming in. Theo Johnson's on the list. Theo Johnson did not earn targets very well. I mean, we're going to get to him here. Let's do Isaac Rex and Erick All. We'll get to Theo Johnson in a moment. But you can see a lot of red here. A lot of red in my screen is never going to be a good thing. Isaac Rex out of BYU. A fun name, but a low target earner. 21.8% is not very good. 5.1 targets per game, playing actually the second most routes in the class besides Dallin Holker. So Isaac Rex played a lot of routes, didn't do a whole lot with it. Negative 0.08 EPA overall. Did not avoid tackles very well. Don't want to see that. Negative EPA out wide. Really bad out of the slot with a negative 0.85 EPA. Worse than the class playing out of the slot. That's not good for Isaac Rex. Negative 0.19 EPA under 10 air yards. You don't want to see a tight end with negative EPAs under 10 air yards because that basically means that the one spot the tight ends gets targeted the most, he's not good at and in fact is actively bad at. So that's a bad thing for Isaac Rex as well. 0.36 EPA, 10 to 20 air yards, that's okay. 0.1 EPA downfield, not very good, but at least it's not negative. Like some of the guys we've talked about so far. Isaac Rex, not great in the red zone, negative 0.29 EPA. I don't even know why he's here. I mean, he's 6'6", 255. It's also in the range where he's maybe a little bit too big, kind of in that Darnell Washington size range, which is going to be visually appealing for coaches. And then you have the guy, and it's like, this is not very good. And I think Isaac Rex, yes, the EPA saying T-Rex is extinct. I don't see any reason why Isaac Rex should be ranked here as the number 6 tight end. I don't think that's correct. I'd rather take a flyer on guys who had less reps. I'd rather take a flyer on these guys that at least earned a lot of targets and a lot of routes. To me, Isaac Rex this is a useless exercise to have Isaac Rex on this list. Erick All, again, the replacement tight end for Sam Laporta, only ran 15.4 routes last year, which compared to Sam Laporta, 23 per game for Laporta. So we are seeing seeing All not that useful. All last year also didn't play at all, looks like, or didn't play enough to qualify. So Erick All, nothing to reference here. And also, frankly, all these guys' 2023 numbers are all dog shit. So there's really nothing I would look at 2023 and go, that overwrites what we're seeing here. Like Isaac Rex was better last year, but still did it at really low volume. So, ugly tight end, man. I really hope that there was going to be like a couple gems here at tight end, and they're not. But Erick All, high target per route run rate. So when he was out there, he was getting targets. 36% target per route run rate would be higher than everybody. Actually, I think would be higher than Michael Mayer was last year as well. Yeah, Mayer was at 35.7%. So Erick All was very involved. All injured knee in October. Iowa QBs were easy under in props all year with under 100 yards per game. So Erick All, I mean, look, high avoided tackle rate, 29%, commanded targets. Not a great EPA, but again, Laporta was a negative EPA guy. I don't want to like cape for Erick All because like this is a really low volume of opportunity, even if it was 4 games, 3 games, whatever the case may be. For Erick All, though, negative EPAs at a lot of these facets here. Negative EPA 10 to 20 air yards, negative EPA under 10 air yards. Good downfield, the one flat EPA there. If All has really good combine testing, let's revisit it because the target per route run rate are really impressive to see at 36%. But small sample size stuff, along the fact that he wasn't that great. I think the Iowa tight end pedigree is kind of fucking with my head a little bit where they just keep churning out guys that are good at the position. And I think for Erick All, I would take a flyer on him over Isaac Rex. I would probably consider taking him over some of these other guys, but he's somebody that's like, this is an incomplete picture. Erick All, to me, I just don't think you can count on him having a role anywhere. I think he's still in that Schumacher tier, but it's kind of a more appealing upside within that Schumacher tier. In terms of like, again, guys that are just like not too special, but have a few things going for them. And maybe if they land in the right situation, they can get there. But for the most part, they're probably just going to be a part of those like Peyton Hendershot, the builds that we're talking that we saw, Jake Ferguson kind of builds where it's like they're 1 out of 3 tight ends. A lot of these guys, how they're feeling so far. Theo Johnson, a man that we just wanted to see here. Not as good as Bretton Strange was last year. Bretton Strange definitely jumped out in the numbers with a 0.58 EPA, though, again, not running a lot of routes per game, not getting a lot of targets. For Theo Johnson, not getting a lot of routes per game, not getting a lot of targets, only a 21.5% target per route run rate. Didn't avoid tackles, had a positive EPA, but again, like he's basically an average tight end amidst this class. Negative 0.6 EPA out wide, positive EPA at the slot for Theo Johnson. Worst version of Brenton Strained is how I feel about these numbers. And frankly, again, another guy at 6'6", maybe a little bit too big if he grades out that big, 6'6", 260. Good in the red zone, though. I guess for Theo, that's one positive thing for him. We do need tight ends to be good in the red zone, so Theo has that going for him. Look, again, Theo, another guy where there are some positive things to point to. Definitely some negatives. Not very shifty here at a 6% avoided tackle rate, which means despite the fact that he's really big, like he's not even powering guys over, not doing a lot there. And then obviously the east to west, shiftability there is not going to be here for him either because of the fact he's not avoiding tackles. So for Theo Johnson, I don't know. I feel like a worse Brenton Strained is probably the one thing that I would plant a flag for the most. Gavin Bartholomew. High air yards per target's the main thing here, but only targeted 15%. That is really low, man. If you can't earn targets at Pittsburgh, it's really hard to expect you to earn targets at the NFL. Terrible out wide. Didn't play there a lot, but a negative 0.75 EPA. Basically net neutral. Playing out of the slot, a 0.03 EPA is basically an average, is what I would say. Probably lower than average for tight ends, honestly. 0.06 EPA under 10 air yards, 0.45 EPA 10 to 20 air yards. Good downfield. Not great in the red zone. It's just another player here that is a body at tight end and not much more. Gavin Bartholomew. That just feels, and again, this is not part of the analysis here I'm trying to give. Gavin Bartholomew, that just feels like a Charlie Werner. That feels like one of the crafts out there. Like it's just a backup tight end kind of dude. Then from the name down is how I feel about Gavin Bartholomew. But I'm sure the Pittsburgh fans, somebody out there loves him, but not seeing it for him. Brevyn Spann, what is his full name? Brevyn Spann-Forster? I don't know. Ford, Spann-Ford, okay. 6'7", 270, way too big to be a tight end. We saw it with Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington at least is chiseled out of muscle. Let's look up Brevyn Spann-Ford just to see. That is a large man at 6'7", 270. And he does not look like he is cut out of marble necessarily. Pretty burly, though. Pretty burly. I mean, just based off the size, we're looking at a less mobile version of Donald Parham was what I would say. For Spann-Ford, though, nothing here stands out again. I'm sorry this is the case, but like 23% target per out run rate, 3.9 targets per game, blah. Negative 0.29 EPA per target is like aggressively bad. This is really egregious. Negative 0.29 EPA there as a tight end. I don't know what you're doing. Negative 0.6 EPA at the slot is awful. He was okay out wide, but small sample size there, and he's gigantic, so that's probably why he was okay out wide. Negative 0.25 EPA under 10 air yards, awful. Negative 0.85 EPA, 10 to 20 air yards, awful. 0.3 EPA downfield, passable if you're good at other things, but he's not. Negative 0.29 EPA in the red zone, awful. Negative 0.54 EPA inside the 10-yard line, awful. Spann-Ford, another guy to take unders and props all year. Spann-Ford, he's large. He's a large man. Besides that, and he's too large. So if anything, that's not even a positive. Spann-Ford should be a left tackle. That's how I feel about looking at this. He should be converted. He should be loading up on the pounds right now to be a 320-pound left tackle is what Spann-Ford should be doing. And then he can run his gimmicky plays, and maybe he'll be better catching the ball when he's reporting as eligible. But like Spann-Ford, this is a worthless player to have on a chart, and I don't think he should be drafted, and I don't think he should be a person whose name we talk about ever again. Mitchell Evans. Mitchell Evans kind of looks like a dude here, though. Again, how much of this is the leftover parts of the Notre Dame offense where they're saying, hey, Michael Mayer, we had this offense last year. We fed the guy a lot. Let's feed the replacement similarly, because it kind of looks like that. 19.5 routes per game, a 27% target route run rate, 10.6 intended air yards per game, or per attempt rather, 0.38 EPA per target. Pretty good playing out wide, but small sample size, but a 1.2 EPA there. Playing out of the slot, a 0.18 EPA. He's positive everywhere, which is aren't a lot of guys in this class to say that. I don't think Mitchell Evans is like good or anything. And I do think I would really watch out for this just being, again, him playing the understudy to Michael Mayer and having that role. But Evans looks okay. Yeah, 24% avoided tackle rate, so it's a little bit shifty. And his EPA is not being driven by a lot of touchdowns here, only a 3.4% touchdown rate per catch. Mitchell Evans is probably, like Sinnott's interesting. Stover's kind of interesting. Evans is right there with him. He should be the number 2 tight end in the class, or 2 to 4. But Evans is a little bit low on the CBS ranking, and I don't think that he should be. This is a solid player, and I guess the concern would be that he's Michael Mayer, and maybe Michael Mayer was gimmicked up to get the amount of work that he got in that offense. But for Evans, he's a worse version of Michael Mayer, and that's, for this class, is an improvement on a lot of these guys. Arthur Smith will be pounding the table for Spann-Ford whenever he lines up another run blocker. I mean, the thing is, like, he did use his tight ends pretty well. Like, you know, Johnny Smith is out there breaking some big plays. But yeah, Spann-Ford, like 6'7", 270, and you're not good at anything. Like, just be a guard, be a tackle. Austin Stogner, Oklahoma. Really low in everything. Didn't earn a lot of routes or a lot of targets. 11% target route run rate. Only 1.9 targets per game on 17.5 routes. 0.48 EPA per target is pretty good, but he didn't avoid tackles, so it kind of feels like he was a catch and fall down guy that got thrown the ball in advantageous spots. 0.6 EPA out of the slot. It's fine. 0.6 EPA, under 10 air yards. That's fine. Didn't get targeted downfield. Yeah. Austin Stogner, this is just not enough of anything. Maybe a little bit too big as well. It's 6'6", 260. For Stogner, though, positive EPA, maybe somebody to watch out for if he puts up really sick combine numbers. For Stogner, though, kind of just a dude. A dude who may be a little bit better, but I think really he was a dude that got fed correctly at Oklahoma, and that's why his numbers look okay. Keon Zipperer does not have enough qualifying numbers here. I know that name, so I would be curious to see Zipperer. Zipperer of 2023 numbers? Zipperer last year, 14 routes per game, 19% target route run rate. Yeah, Zipperer was okay last year. Very small sample size stuff. Isn't Zipperer like an elite athlete or something? I feel like that's why I know the name. I don't know. Anyway, though, Zipperer, not good enough last year to really worry about, and he did not qualify in a sample size, though. Maybe, did he get hurt this year? I'm sure historical anomalies, somebody in the chat will know. But Zipperer, to me, based off these numbers, if he didn't qualify this year, the 2023 numbers aren't enough to justify him not earning enough to qualify this year, so I don't think he's a dude we're talking about. The names that we got from chat, we got Jatavian Sanders here. Sanders at 0.36 EPA per target, good. 19 routes per game, okay. 26% target route run rate, okay. 0.74 EPA out wide, 0.25 EPA in the slot, not too bad. 0.05 EPA under 10 air yards could be better. 0.65 EPA, 10 to 20 air yards is okay. 0.38 EPA downfield, okay. Really bad in the red zone, though. Jesus, Sanders is awful in the red zone. -1 EPA flat, -2.2 EPA getting targeted inside the 10-yard line. Not a high sample size for these targets, but that's really bad in the red zone. Sanders, I don't think looks bad. I'd still say Evans over him. Sanders, I think, better avoided tackle rate than some guys. Maybe a little bit of athleticism there. I like the name. Kind of feels like an XFL name / UFL now name, I suppose. But if we're going off the name draft here, Gavin Bartholomew, a tight end, will be in the NFL for 15 years as a third-string tight end. Jatavian Sanders, the guy who comes in and has an attitude problem in the UFL is how I feel about his name. Dallin Holker here, the last name we got from the chat. 36 routes per game, so he's already heavily weighted towards he should look great because of the fact that he played a lot more routes. 9 targets per game, so he earned a lot more targets. Per route, though, only a 25% target route run rate, so he was not targeted that much, was Dallin Hooker. Most air yards per game, but of course it's going to happen when you have 9 targets and about 14 more routes than some of the other guys. So Dallin Hooker, nothing great there. Negative EPA, negative 0.05 EPA, which could be okay, but it's still not good enough. 23% avoided tackle rate, also, again, could be better. It's still, good for tight ends overall. 1.4 targets out wide was bad with them, negative 0.32 EPA. 5.3 targets out of the slot was bad with them, negative 0.2 EPA. Was okay under 10 air yards with a 0.01 EPA, but a negative 0.2, 10 to 20, negative 0.03, plus 20 air yards, and wasn't great at the red zone either. So for Holker, I don't know. He played a lot. But I think if anything, he just speaks to what the most important part of fantasy football, fantasy basketball, any of these things are. Baseball, same thing. You want a lot of at bats. Holker just got a lot of work, and he looks good because he got a lot of work. And I think that's where Holker stands. So our takeaways here for the very exciting tight end video. And I do appreciate all you guys who watch this one. So if you can, please help a brother out. Subscribe down below. Hit the like button. Leave a comment, of course, because this video needs all the help it's going to get. Rookie previews at this point, not the sexiest thing in the world for views, but also tight ends, the least sexy position for views. So your help, if you somebody watching this one, if you support the process here, hit that like button. And, of course, leave a comment and subscribe if you really want esoteric rookie content. All right, takeaways for this one. Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is the takeaway. He's the only tight end you can trust out of the rookies. These other guys here, Sinnott, Stover, Mitchell Evans, they're okay. I don't know. Like I would take them 1 out of every 20 drafts, 1 out of every 30, maybe. We'll see if the draft capital starts to look a little bit higher as more mock drafts come out. But I think for those guys, they're just a tier behind. I think a tier behind every tight end that got drafted last year for the most part. Brock Bowers, though, is better than all those guys from last year. He is one to prioritize right away. I think from day one, ADP-wise, he should be going where Dalton Kincaid went last year. So we're talking 120s to 130s. If he's going in the 150s, the 170s, I would pound Brock Bowers in every draft until he's not going there. Bowers needs a good landing spot, and I do think with his talent, with his ability, and probably how he is going to grade out in terms of the interviews and all of that, because this is a guy who was like playing from day one, has had a pro approach from what I know of Brock Bowers. I think he will land in a very good spot, in a spot where they really want him and want him to be a key part of that offense. The risk profile would be that he could be a Michael Mayer, and maybe he's just not the guy that everybody thought that he was in college for X amount of time. I don't think it's the case for Bowers because he's super young and athletic and should combine test well. But Bowers is like it. Like, if you're going to take one thing away from this video, it's the thing you already knew. It's the guy in the thumbnail, Brock Bowers, is your rookie tight end to target, and then add him into the list with the other guys that we talked about earlier. So there we go. Check the chat real fast. See if you guys have anything else of note that I should hit on here. Bring on the rookie previews anytime. All right. I appreciate that here. I know it's, again, I see the view counts. I know how it is, but ultimately this is part of the process that we just got to do. Got duped by Darnell Washington's combine numbers last year. So Spann-Ford's second round steals, not out of the question. Yeah, I did too. When I saw him pushing the sled, when I saw him running out there, and obviously he tested well, I was like, maybe he will get used in a good way. Then he went to Pittsburgh, and he just didn't get on the field. And he was on the field and he didn't get targeted. And then when Freiermuth was out, he didn't get targeted at all. They put Connor Hayward ahead of him. So I think the size being too big to be a tight end is something to watch out for. And if Washington was too big to be a tight end, Spann-Ford is definitely too big to be a tight end. So that's the thing I would keep in mind there. And then one last take from Historical Anomalies, who clearly knows what he's talking about better than I do. Bowers would have been first off the board last year. Rest of the class looks meh, maybe besides Sanders. Look, man, Sanders in the red zone, I did not think that was good, but maybe the freak athletic testing will be there for him. If any of these guys is a freak athlete, it'll look better. But even then, like Zach Kuntz was a freak athlete based on the combine testing last year, and he didn't really come up and then didn't see any playing time. Still was behind guys like Jeremy Rucker, guys like Uzoma, guys like Tyler Conklin. So coming from a low school with low draft capital, kind of doesn't matter what you are, at least in year one. And for tight ends too, the development curve is like year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5 to be when some guys break out, like an Evan Ingram, in a real way. So I think that's something to keep in mind here for a lot of these guys, that they might not look good day one, besides Brock Bowers, but they could look better in year 2, year 3. But from day one, I don't think they get on the field. Just the man in his spreadsheets. Al knows. Look, Al signed up for the spreadsheet, so at least I got that going for me. But appreciate all you guys being here with me live. Again, please do subscribe down below. Shouts to the Squirt Squad. Updated graphic here. Fortunately, lost a few members, gained a few more, but that's how, unfortunately, it's going to go. So please do join down below. Hit that join button. $4.99 a month. Helps support the show here. Helps me keep putting it on here without the sponsors and stuff that are really driving value for us revenue-wise. So please do that. And thank you to all these fine folks who are fine parts of the community that help me keep this going every day, and very much appreciated parts. Reading of names coming up on Friday for all the new names as well. Check out Probably too. If you want to support Splash Play, the other way to do that would be my side business here, probably.com. Getting good bets. Check out our free NBA bets video today if you want to see a preview of what we do at Probably app on YouTube, and in general, all the social media handles at Probably app as well. But check it out. You want to win bets, you want to save money up for best ball. That's what I'm doing right now, just hammering NBA bets every day to keep funding losing money in NFL on the weekends. Honestly, this weekend was split, but still, like, point being, like, that's what betting should be to you, I think, is you take the easy things, rack up some wins there. Even if you're adding just fucking 1-2 units a week, it's more money to have in your bankroll, and that's what the process of Probably, where we use the data from the winningest sportsbooks around the world to find you mathematically profitable bets time and time again, and save 50%. That means getting all of our pregame data for under $10 a month at probably.com/subscribe. I'll be back. I don't know if I'm going to have a video tomorrow, just because, like, I don't know what there is to talk about at this point, so probably back on Friday. If something strikes tomorrow, maybe back tomorrow at 11 a.m. as well, but we will see how that goes. Appreciate all you guys being with me here. As always, follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. Go Brock Bowers, go. Add him to the list of rookies that we will now victory lap all 2024 and 2025 if they hit. And I'll see you guys again soon. Enjoy your days. Good luck. Bye.